special game day eve edition of our conversation with JC Shurburtt of Inside the Gamecock of the Big Spur. JC, what's going on, man?
And hey, man, great to be with you on a Friday, Chris.
Yeah,
great to be with you.
Appreciate you taking the time, and I appreciate you being flexible with your schedule, my friend.
Oh, yeah, it's no problem. I try to stay as flexible as possible these days.
Yeah, you just never know, right, when the content will come calling. And obviously, I know you guys just wrapped up your show over at Inside the Gamecocks, and you guys do a fantastic job. And again, want to say thank you for having me on the airwaves yesterday. Let's get right into it, JC. South Carolina coming off a really tough game against Mizzou, and I won't spend too much time dwelling on that, but I guess I'd ask you this because I feel like you and I both, right, we're really confident going in that ball game. South Carolina, tons of momentum. And I don't know if it's too aggressive to say they laid an egg, but it sure enough felt that way. How surprised were you at the overall result against the Tigers last weekend?
You know, it's one of those games I thought for South Carolina it was a tough matchup because you look at Missouri's defensive numbers and sort of how they've played most of the year, and you think, well, you know, this is a good defense, and obviously, you know, Kentucky was a good defense too. A&M not so much, but you know, I felt like South Carolina being at home and with the way the defense for the Gamecocks had played would be able to solve them a little better. And what happened was the first half or first quarter, the Gamecocks just straight up their defensive staff got out-coached by Eli Drinkwitz. I mean, there's no other way around it. Brady Cook played better than we expected. Right. The Gamecocks didn't really get the turnovers, bad call on the interception. But I did think Clayton White and his staff did a good job of making some adjustments in the second half in terms of limiting Missouri's scoring. They stayed on the field too long. I mean, don't get me wrong. But in terms of limiting them to, you know, 6 points, you think you have to have your offense come back, you know. And I said this in the SEC, you face such good coaches and good players every week. Inevitably, no matter if you're the favorite or whatever, you're going to do it to someone else. You're going to have a game where you fall behind like that early. I mean, look at the Auburn game last year, you know, at South Carolina. You know, the Gamecocks came back and won. That should not have been an insurmountable lead. Carolina does make a game of it, pulling within a touchdown, and then, you know, the air got let out of the balloon yet again. You know, I think that anytime you have an offense that's so dependent on one player, you need to have a backup plan just in case in the back of your mind. There didn't seem to be a backup plan for the Gamecocks. You know, some of the answers you get about Bell not playing but 9 snaps and all this other stuff, you know, it adds kind of fuel to the fire when we're talking about Marcus Satterfield and the job he's done as the OC at South Carolina through 21 games. I think people are just sick of watching it. You know, they're just sick of watching bad offense around here. I think Spencer Rattler continues to over-process, which happens in offenses like this. You know, he's missing guys sometimes he's not. You know, sometimes he doesn't have time, all that good stuff. So, you know, something's got to give. I mean, you know, you can't, you know, keep going down this path. And I thought, you know, it's kind of interesting in the press conference this week. Satterfield goes, "We're still figuring out our offense. You know, it's still early."
We're still molding our offense. Yeah.
This is college football. One of the guys that got hired the same time you did as a head coach, you know, is fired right now. Already fired. You know, that's the SEC. You don't have that much time. And you honestly don't have that much time in college. And if something's going to take a year and a half, Chris, for players to learn and get down cold, you're never going to have that be an advantage because in college, you switch players. Yep. You know, kids leave and graduate. You get new guys coming in. So,
especially in the portal era with guys coming in and out yearly. Yeah, if you have a system that takes 2 years to learn, I mean, that doesn't benefit you a whole lot.
At quarterback, especially. I mean, look at how many transfer quarterbacks are very, very important to their respective teams. You know, Hooker at Tennessee, Daniels at LSU. You know, you look at how many transfer quarterbacks they had at Oklahoma. When Lincoln Riley was there and how well they did with that. So you just don't have that. You don't have that luxury these days. You know, and I don't know that even if there wasn't a portal, Chris, that you still do just because it's college ball. You have 20 hours a week, 3 of it's the game. to work on all this stuff. They have class. You have to motivate kids in college. There's no motivation that takes place in the NFL, and it's surprising to me that, and I've seen this happen with other coaches, namely, I think Kurt Roper a little bit. They go to the league. Maybe they're not even doing an important job, but coaches that love ball, right? And when I say love ball, I mean they love getting on the chalkboard, coming up with play. They'll talk about it all day, all that good stuff. The NFL is just so fascinating, right? It's just because it's there all this nuance, all this new stuff every week. I mean, these guys really love it. I mean, they get off on it. And so it's fascinating to me that, like, you have a guy that was only there a year, and he comes back and wants to, do all this stuff, and it's maddening. But I did some research too. I look back at the Temple days when he coached under Matt Rule, and they brought in a new quarterbacks coach, and they were talking that was the same narrative there: simplifying, making better decisions, blah blah blah. And so I don't know. Maybe this is something that's just kind of been out there for a while. But it's a situation that I don't think, as things stand today, is sustainable. I do think that in college football, sometimes you get surprised, right? And sometimes in 4 games, the narrative can completely change. But I think as of right now, we've seen enough. And I think it's just something that, Shane Beamer in the long term, the near future, is going to have to address one way or the other. So that's my take there. As far as that game against Missouri goes, I think you got to flush it and move forward, and understand there's still ball to be played. And if you don't win at Vanderbilt this weekend, excuse Siri for going off. She called it something I said. She's going off right now. But, if you don't win this game this weekend, the wheels are completely coming off this season. And there's been so much good that Shane Beamer's done, and, so many good moments so far. A loss like this weekend, last weekend was bad because it was one of those things where they left a lot on the table. They would have been in the playoff rankings had they won last weekend. But, you lose this one, it's going to start to get pretty ugly around Columbia. And I don't know what will happen if they drop the game to the doors this weekend.
And JC, I know coming into the season, obviously you were skeptical on Marcus Satterfield, as many were, and you sort of addressed it there at the end. But I mean, it definitely sounds like, at least again, from what we've seen at this point, like you mentioned, a lot can change over 4 games, narratives can change. But I will say this, JC, and of course, we didn't lead with this because when you're winning, right, let's focus on the winning. Let's enjoy the winning. Like, winning cures all, as you and I talked, I think, literally yesterday. But I think everybody could look at it with a critical eye, even after you beat Kentucky, you beat Texas A&M, and say, like you mentioned, this is not sustainable. And for the health of South Carolina football, I think moving off of this year and moving into the future of the Shane Beamer era, I think a change will be necessary at OC because, like you mentioned, people are just tired of watching bad offense. And there's no good team out there that's not scoring a lot of points. And I just don't think at Carolina, I just talked to Jake Crane in the first hour, and, he loves to harp on personnel. And I mean, I love Jake and I value his opinion. I don't want to make it sound like I don't, but he likes to talk personnel. And I feel like I'm as critical as anyone about personnel. And hey, if you just don't have the bodies, you don't have the players, it's about the Jimmies and Joes, not the X's and O's. But when you've got Satterfield, you're not producing. The numbers aren't there. You got all the damning stuff happening off the field with Jaheim Bell's mom and, strong rumors of losing a recruit to Tennessee because he doesn't like your offense, thinks it's boring. And then you got Sat talking about 12 and 13 personnel this and, 275 yards rushing per game. It's like, there's so much damning evidence. And at South Carolina, if you try to beat Alabama and Georgia and these top teams at their own game at this 12 and 13 personnel BS, you just don't have a shot. You don't have a chance, right? So, I mean, I know you just mentioned it, but I know you'd agree that moving forward, unless something just astronomically changes, right? Marcus Satterfield does some DMT or trips on some mushrooms and has this awakening, right? I think it's in the best interest of South Carolina football to move on from his services at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think it has to head in that direction at some point. I'll say this too. As far as the personnel goes, I don't think people, if you just watch South Carolina and you're an outsider, like I know Jay Boy is, I don't think he's like following up on South Carolina football as much as maybe some other teams. And I like him too. I think he's a great guy, really talented guy. You know, game to game, it's hard to tell. I mean, because if you happen to watch the Arkansas game, you know that Juice Wells is really good. Well, if you watch Georgia, you don't. You know, if you watch the bowl game last year, you think Jaheim Bell could be an All SEC player, but other times you don't see it.
Yeah.
You know, the last two games, you look at Austin Stogner and how well he's played. And you didn't really think that at the beginning of the year. You know, Marshawn Lloyd has had a consistent run of 4 games, and then when he goes out and you know you insist on running Juju between the tackles, and you insist on playing Christian Bill Smith, who wasn't himself last week, and you can't get a push up front, then you think, man, these running backs behind this guy Lloyd's their whole team. And I don't think that's the case. And I think a few years from now, Chris, when we look at the guys that are going to be in the NFL, it's kind of like the Muschamp era on defense. You're going to look and see a lot of individuals that make it at the next level, and you're going, where was this guy? Well, he was kind of buried in the dogmatic commitment to scheme, as Phil likes to say. And that's just not, Tony Morell on my site had an article this week. It's about players, not plays. And what's extremely disheartening is you look at Tennessee, and there's all kinds of articles on The Athletic this week about Josh Heupel's offense and how it's peak Art Briles from Baylor, right? There's plays, Chris, where the Vols snap the ball and their 2 boundary receivers or their 2 receivers to the field side just stand there. They don't even run routes. And it's because, because they only make you read half the field. They have option routes. They have probably like 7 different plays. They run 25 different formations out of it, and they go really fast. And every coach that they interviewed anonymously about their offense goes, it's so simple, but it's just hard to stop. And then you look at South Carolina with things like 13-word play calls, and all these things sound good on paper. They sound, that's going to be an NFL offense. It's going to be great. But when you start thinking about college kids learning it, it gets really kind of, disheartening, because you could just see the confusion in Spencer Rattler's face. I think that's probably been one of Jaheim Bell's issues. If you kind of read between the lines, there's probably a reason why, he's not out there lined up well or out there a whole lot, because maybe he doesn't grasp all this stuff they're trying to do. And good coaches, though, they play their best players, and they find a way, especially, and look, I think the personnel is much better than it's shown, but, South Carolina's not loaded, right? You have so many guys that are capable of being elite playmakers in this league. You better find a way to get them the ball. And that just continues to not happen. And it's not just Jaheim. There's games early in the year that Marshawn was healthy. Arkansas comes to mind. They have a touchdown drive, and they didn't even throw it. First touchdown of the game out there, never went back to the run again. And we've seen this over and over and over again. And it's frustrating, and we'll probably see it Saturday. But the idea Saturday is to win in spite of it, which, South Carolina has gone 12-9 under Shane Beamer through 21 games. So in many ways they've been able to do that. And I think Saturday will be another one of those opportunities.
Yeah, I got to be honest, JC. You talking about the playmakers and their lack of usage, it really does make my blood boil. And thinking to the Mizzou game and the lack of willingness to adjust and adapt and change. And listen, Marcus Satterfield's not an idiot. He's gotten to the point he's gotten because like you said, he knows ball. I mean, there's nobody that, at least I think, that makes it to the SEC level of coaching, and God forbid he was in the NFL, that isn't smart when it comes to football and that knows ball. But, I left that Missouri game, and obviously my thoughts are very well documented. And, I bit my tongue after Kentucky and A&M, because, again, you were winning ball games. Like we all just want to win. Winning cures all. I'm not going to be the guy leading some revolution after a dub. Like, hey, the win's great, but this. Like, no, let's focus on the winning, all that. We understood what the issues were. But what was so disheartening about Mizzou, or just what I felt like after Mizzou, it was like, I don't want Marcus Satterfield replaced because I feel like South Carolina should be Tennessee, although that'd be really nice. I want Marcus Satterfield replaced because, like, I watched the Missouri game, and I know sometimes you have off games, but you watch this football team this year, and you're just like, they may not be Tennessee, but damn, it feels like we're better than we are. I really believe that South Carolina should be better than it is on offense, right? And you talk about the NFL scheme and how complicated it is, and maybe that's why Jaheim Bell's not out. And it just, that makes your blood boil, man. It does, you know? And like Jaheim Bell, obviously, getting 0 targets against Missouri. I mean, it's inexcusable, right? There's no good excuse for it. And I tell you, moving into that point, JC, have you ever felt like there was a week where the press conferences were as highly criticized as they were this week? Because I know you and I have talked, that coach speak stuff. I mean, you have to do it, right? It's part of the gig, part of the job. But boy, it is really tough to stomach when you're not producing and you're not winning, and especially you're coming off a week where you said, you know, if it was up to me, I'd get Jaheim the ball 20 times. Well, you didn't even target him. So that was a lie, or that just didn't come to fruition or whatever. And then the coach speak becomes nauseating, right? When you have the type of performance you had against Mizzou. And I don't know, JC, I don't even have a question to follow up with. I'm venting to you because hearing that, like, it's frustrating. It's because, like you mentioned, you feel like you have these pieces and it's just such brutal mismanagement. I'm not saying we should be scoring 50 a game, but the Gamecocks should be better than 13th in the SEC in offense. I mean, that goes without saying. Goes without saying.
There's no question. And you know, you kind of, you know, sometimes, Chris, fans tend to kind of, and I think through my career, I've been guilty of this at times. Maybe you're quick to blame the coach,
right,
for bad play. You know, basically a good play call is a play call that works, and a bad one's one that doesn't. And there's more to it than that. But when you see things like the situation inside the 2-yard line at Tennessee last year, that was completely unnecessary. You know, I had somebody that, you know, considers himself somewhat of a football expert try to defend it and say, well, they weren't getting a push. Well, they had run the ball right down the field for the first time all year with Kevin Harris. And last time I checked, the way you beat a team that goes fast is you have to counter them in scoring and, you know, control the ball on the ground. We all saw that 5 years in a row against Clemson, or 4 at least, when Chad Morris was the OC and Spurrier would play a game of keep away. That's just how you beat those teams. I saw Georgia's going to have to beat Tennessee this weekend. And you get inside, points are so precious at that point. You run the DeCarry Joyner play that hadn't worked at all ever. And then you throw that halfback pass with Birch. And the answer was, well, we decided we were going to do that. Well, you know, you got to kind of have a feel for things, right? You know, you can't just first a goal from the 2 and you run 2 gadget plays back to back when you've run it all the way down their throat. What does that tell in your line and your backs and everybody? I mean, hey, save that for later. You may need it. And so there's stuff like that. There's stuff like the game plan against Clemson last year was the same game plan they ran against Auburn. You know, we ran the same plays. When all year, you know, they've been putting in different plays every week. You know, there's the size of the playbook. There's, you know, this whole notion that, you know, the players have to adjust to the scheme. The scheme does not have to adjust to the players. That's bad coaching. That's not sound. Nobody that's successful does it that way unless you're like an offensive guru, like a Steve Spurrier or a Mike Leach or somebody like that, where the system does carry you. And even those guys will like strip it back and adjust it depending on the personnel they had. You know, Connor Shaw was not a typical Spurrier quarterback. Well, guess what? They adjusted. You know, Mike Leach probably doesn't adjust, right? And he gets his butt beat sometimes. But you know, what they do is they just go out there and rep it over and over. And it's not that hard to learn. That air raid's not that hard to learn. So it works. I mean, you know, it was very disheartening to see, you know, Tennessee has the number 1 offense in the country, and they basically run 5 plays, and everybody's fired up and in sync, and they look like a juggernaut. I mean, and that's the thing. South Carolina's offense is complicated to run, but it looks super simple and basic because of the confusion and the ugly play. South Carolina's second in the SEC in negative plays behind only Missouri. Tennessee's offense looks like it's like something that got printed out from like the flux capacitor and Back to the Future, right? It's futuristic, looks futuristic as you know what. Very simple, old school Texas high school offense, right? with 7 plays. And that's what you get from guys from the Browse tree. And you kind of look around the league, who has elevated their program, outside of South Carolina's elevated, but Ole Miss elevated. They're now in the top 10. They were a 5-win team when Matt Luke got fired. Arkansas was a dumpster fire. Like, they, as bad as things got at South Carolina, they were nothing compared to how bad it got at Arkansas. Nothing. Like losing to Western Kentucky by 26 at home against a quarterback that you'd run off and you're Chad Morris. It got that bad. Well, how are they back? Well, they have played pretty good defense at times. Barry Odom's a good DC, but they're doing it with their offense, right? Tennessee, of course, we all know about. Mississippi State, I mentioned them. They hired Leach at the same time. They've upset, beaten 6 top 25 teams since he's been there in 3 years. And so you look at how these teams are elevating. They're all doing it with offense. Even go back to LSU in 2019. I think they kind of provided a blueprint that, like, hey, Les Miles has been here. You tried all that crap. It was like watching paint dry, toward the end. Then you brought in Matt Canada, and he, a little too complicated there. All right, let's just throw caution to the wind and go for it, right? And that's how Coach Ed Orgeron won a national championship and had a dominant team. His offense. Teams are elevating with offenses these days. It's always going to be important to play defense in this league, but you can't be like this on offense. I mean, you just cannot be this clunky and struggle and confused and all that. And dude, it's been happening for 2 years. We've seen a few moments, right? But we've never seen this offense make a difference in a game because, like, scheme wise, because even the bowl with some nice stuff at the beginning ended up being one of those games a lot like Florida last year, where Tar Heels just could not stop Kevin Harris. And South Carolina has most offensive systems are very good, right? When the other team can't stop you from running, but that's not going to happen every week. It's just not.
Right. For sure, JC. To your point, I do think that and I'm not trying to, I'll just say this: the future of the Shane Beamer era in Columbia is dependent on South Carolina getting good on offense. I mean, just bottom line. I feel like that's an obvious statement. I don't want people to think I'm like starting to talk about Shane Beamer's job status or anything, because I'm certainly not. But that's just the reality of it. Like, his tenure will be defined by, can the Gamecocks figure it out offensively? Bottom line, point blank, end of discussion. Let's talk, JC. Let's move into this game this weekend, because speaking of South Carolina's offense, Beamer on his call-in show last night saying Marshawn Lloyd is questionable for this ball game. We're hearing rumors that he may not go. What are you hearing on the status of Marshawn Lloyd? And if he can't go, how concerning is that for the Gamecocks offense?
He's got a strange injury, because it's like half the time, like this even happened during the game. Half the time, he was able to go play, and then all of a sudden, nope, I can't. It was just kind of weird. Earlier in the week, there was optimism he would play, but he looked fine running around and all that. But I don't know. I want to say he re-injured it, because Shane did say he's gotten a little better. Maybe on Sunday or something. I don't know. I checked pretty early on this, right? And so then I was told yesterday it's very much up in the air. I think kind of with the way injuries are communicated around here, if I had to put money on it, I'd probably say he's not playing. Yeah. And I wrote an article today, like, well who's going to run the ball? And so you hear this stuff about Jaheim Bell now being the starting running back, which I think is fine. It's not a bad idea, because Christian Bill Smith hasn't been 100%. Juju, you can't run him between the tackles a whole bunch. Then you got Dante Miller, Rashad Amos, and Lavoisier Carroll, which, one of those 3 guys I think could do a good job. I guess they don't feel like that. So if you're going to play Jaheim at running back, More power to you. I hope it works. But they've got to do more, I think, than just stick Jaheim back there and hand it to him like he's Marshawn Lloyd. I said you could see a DeCarry Joyner package this week. I think it's a package, not a play. I think when you stick him out there for one play, you've done it. The next time you do it for one play, it'll be, I think, the 9th or 10th time in 21 games. And the best play was that 3-yard run against Georgia earlier this year, which is one of the worst calls I've ever seen in my life. You can get Juju on the perimeter. I mean, I don't understand what happened to the offense we saw in the bowl game. They were very good at having balance, making North Carolina defend the whole field. And it wasn't just Joyner. I mean, it was the calls and things like that, until the second half when they just couldn't stop Harris. Right. Is it Beal Smith? Did they put Doty in? This got lost, I think, in Satterfield's press conference. But he mentioned Xavier Leggett because he was alluding to people. And he said the guy that had the 100-yard kickoff return, So could you see Xavier Leggett taking some handoffs? I don't know. I think they do have to find a way to run the ball because, like I said, it's a proven fact that when this offense is not able to run it, usually the Gamecocks don't win and look ugly losing.
JC, would you expect South Carolina to force feed Jaheim Bell the football this weekend? Because obviously 0 targets against Mizzou. You've got his mother on social media, obviously, voicing her thoughts and feelings, which I think most Gamecock fans would agree with. Then you've got, 24/7 Sports, which people got on me about it. But listen, this is notable information when you got a guy from 24/7 talking about Jaheim Bell being one of the top targets in the transfer portal. It feels like it would do South Carolina a lot of good to make him a point of emphasis in this football game. You mentioned it, running back. I think about the fact that Vanderbilt is the worst pass defense statistically in the SEC. And granted, I know who they've played, but how do you expect the Gamecocks to use Jaheim Bell? Would you expect him to touch the football early and often in this one?
Well, I think everybody's heard it, and I think they're going to try to get it to him. My question, what I keep getting caught up in is, okay, it's important for Jaheim Bell to touch the football, right? But is he really your best running back? I mean, if Beal Smith's not 100%, don't play him. If Lloyd's not healthy, you can't play him. You got to, if he's out, he's out. And we've talked about Juju. So, I kind of think Dante Miller's a pretty good player. I kind of think Rashad Amos is a pretty good player at running back. Maybe I'm wrong, but is this Jaheim Bell thing like the next big idea? And sometimes the big ideas, like playing Jordan at quarterback last year at the bowl game, work. Most of the time, they haven't. So, that's my question: is Jaheim going to be your best chance to line up and run the football Saturday night? And if so, that's fine. Because you kind of need a running back. It still doesn't, I still can't get over like why he's not more involved in the passing game. I know that, again, this offense is complex. I know he's sometimes had problems getting lined up right and stuff like that, but that's on the coach. You have to still adjust what you're doing, especially when you don't have a system that's done much. There's nothing since in 21 games that I think says this is a great system if it's just executed properly, because they fundamentally have problems executing every single game, and no execution's perfect, but that it's a dumpster, dumpster fire to me is kind of what we've seen on offense, for the majority of the past 21 games. So I think that, I'm with you. I think they're going to force feed Jaheim. I think that, they'll get him the ball this time. We'll see what he can do. My question is that if you just decide, well, this is how he's going to get his touches, we're going to hand it to him 15 times. Is that better than using one of your backs? I mean, is that, and that's a question that I think, probably will have to be answered during game time, in my opinion.
Now, JC, along with Marcus Satterfield, of course, Spencer Rattler catching the heat this week. And, I mean, you look at his numbers, 5 TDs, 9 interceptions now, has the fumble in that ballgame. Made some plays where I think you look at and you say, that's the guy we wanted to come in. But Been a rough season. I mean, there's no other way to put it. At what point do you think South Carolina does and should consider benching him? Do you think they shouldn't? I mean, I'm not leading the bench Rattler charge because I don't really feel like there's an answer, on the bench waiting in the wings that is like the savior at that position. But, I look at it this way, JC, if for the fourth straight game, you reach halftime and you're at 100 yards of offense and it's just you're just sputtering yet again. I don't know that I'll be calling for the change, but it wouldn't shock me, right? Like you mentioned, you just can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. Where do you stand on that in regards to the quarterback conversation around Spencer Rattler?
Man, I think it's been completely a bad deal for him this year, man. He's swimming mentally. He's restricted. It's just you just kind of want him to go out there and play ball, right? And it's very hard as an athlete to do that when you're thinking too much, and that's exactly what's going on. He looks like a rookie. I've said this many times. Looks like a rookie quarterback in the NFL. Rookie quarterbacks in the NFL are capable, talented, good players, but they struggle very, very much at a high level their rookie seasons if a franchise has to start them, just because the mental side of that game is so different, and so you kind of put two and two together. You're like, well, this is supposed to be this NFL offense. You talk about 13-word play calls. You talk about this glacial pace they move with personnel packages, and like I said, it looks like Spencer's got an iPad on his wrist with all the stuff they have written on it. Go play. I mean, he just needs to go play. And here's where I stand on that, Chris. If I knew, and if Luke Doty, let's say, all right, Spencer throws a pick, or Spencer gets banged up, Luke comes in and has a great game, and he's running and zipping it up and down the field, I'll eat my words. I'll need to see what happens in the following week, because it seems around here sometimes that some player will have a big game and do something great, and instead of sticking with what works, everything gets reinvented the following week and they struggle again. But I'll eat my words on it. But I know Spencer's missed some balls. I know Spencer's missed some guys, but that happens when you're thinking too much. The narrative at Oklahoma was that he can't read a defense, but he still was completing 70% of his passes when he got benched. I'm not saying he played perfect. I think what got him is maybe their offensive line was missing some people. It was not the pandemic year, so teams' defense came back in 2021 a little bit. So maybe they were able to disguise their coverages more. You had a lot of players missing week in and week out in 2020, so maybe those defenses were more complete. That was fine. I still think Oklahoma could have won, without him. I also think Caleb Williams' ability to run the football was a big part of that decision Lincoln Riley made. So you see what his you had to evaluate him, right? So you see what his strengths and weaknesses are, and I understand the challenge of turning him into NFL ready, and it's going to make you look really good and all that. But priority number one needs to be scoring points, going up and down the field, winning football games, and that's. It bothers me, Chris, when there's such a focus on these ancillary parts of college football, by coaches. I think that, the previous staff I think they got worried because they weren't recruiting that, at the highest level. And so they'd go try to sell guys on getting them ready for the league. And Travaris Robinson was really good at that. But, you saw what happened to the defense by the time all was said and done. And that's the same thing, complete mass confusion on the back end. And I thought that was a big, important thing, for Beamer when he took over is, go get a college coordinator on defense. And he did. Clayton White runs essentially some of the same stuff Muschamp did. It's just taught at a lot simpler, And you saw that last year with guys like Jalen Foster playing free, like they've been released from something, Cam Smith, those guys, the secondary. And so it's just it baffles me that we're sitting here talking about the offense in that exact same way. I think we know the defense had some talent. And that I believe this offense does have talent too. It's just not playing up its to its potential because it's just the wrong plan for the wrong group of guys.
JC, switching to the defensive side of the ball, because I know we could just talk offense all day, obviously, with the issues at hand. But you look at Vanderbilt led by quarterback A.J. Swan, which is so interesting. You look at Spencer Rattler's numbers. Then you look at A.J. Swan, the youngster, 8 touchdowns, 1 interceptions, played really good football for them. In the backfield, they've got Ray Davis, which he's one of my key matchups in the Gamecock stopping. And on the outside, I know I talked with you about Will Shepard, Jaden McGowan, the South Carolina kid. Just talk about the challenge that Vandy presents for the South Carolina defense. And, again, all eyes have been on this offense this week, and deservedly so. But, there were some things against Mizzou that maybe you look at and you have a little bit of concern. But like you mentioned, I think Clayton White and company were able to make those adjustments. And I said it over the summer. I don't think this is an elite defense like you mentioned, but it's a defense that's going to keep you in every ball game, no doubt. But what do you look at from the Vanderbilt offense and the challenges they present tomorrow night?
Now, they do have a really good plan. I think, one of the things Derek Mason could never figure out, and it's what made him sort of one of the worst hires I think anybody's made. He, in the league, he comes in, and Vanderbilt had just won 9. I think they returned 17 starters off James Franklin's team. James ran a nice, collegiate spread, similar to what you see up at Penn State from time to time out of him. Not a, it's not a legendary offense or anything, but it was good enough, and they moved the football. Well, Derek Mason comes in. It's 22 personnel and things like that, like they were doing at Stanford, and he proceeds to go winless in the SEC, which was hilarious to me because I picked him to go winless in 2014, and all 3 Vandy fans in Nashville got mad at me. But told me I was an idiot, right? So that for years Vandy has been, with the exception of like Jay Cutler and Earl Bennett and that kind of time period, they've been a team that if they can get you in like a 24-20 game, they're happy. Good defense, stellar defense, bunch of tough kids. Offense was a mystery. Well, Clark Lee. They run offense, and they've got game breakers. You mentioned McGowan, a guy from Lawrence, South Carolina, 4.31 in the 40. Will Shepard's really good. Their running back's good. The running back that quit the team was actually really good too. So they used to have 2. Now they've just got 1. They're pretty decent up front. A.J. Swan's touchdown to interception ratio is outstanding. Missouri's pressure did get to him, though. He was 13 for 30 in that game. And then we all saw last year, I think everyone was expecting Seals to start for Vanderbilt, and Mike Wright started, and you saw what happened. There was a lot of adjustment that had to be made, and Wright got free. So that presents another challenge, too, is having to prepare for both quarterbacks. I think Vanderbilt is not quite at the level where, Chris, they're going to be able to go put a bunch of points on the board against a Georgia or Bama, and a defense like Missouri. Missouri's probably top 4 or 5, 3, maybe even in the league defensively. But, you look at Ole Miss, they scored on them. They scored on Wake Forest. They put 63 on Hawaii at the beginning of the year. They're a more capable Vanderbilt offense than maybe some people think. So I think it's not only going to be important for South Carolina's offense to get their act together and put points on the board. The Gamecock defense, I think, will be challenged by these guys. And I think what you got to do is take your advantage on the line of scrimmage, get back there, affect the passer, and don't let them hit you on the perimeter, because they're similar to Missouri from the standpoint of that's what they want to do. They want to get it out to McGowan or Shepard and let them run by you for a big play. So, the Gamecocks have to tackle on the perimeter, have to contain that type of thing. And, that didn't happen so well last week. But given what happened last week, you probably would think this defensive group would respond in a big way.
And winning the turnover battle, JC, I think it's so interesting. South Carolina, of course, 5-3. They're 5-0 when they force a turnover, and then 0-3 when they don't. So that seems like a pretty simple recipe for success. Get the football off of Andy. You should have a fun night. JC, I've gone on record 26-13. My prediction in this game, I do expect the Gamecocks offensively to force feed Jaheim Bell, which I think will frustrate Carolina fans, because I think he has a big game, and we're all left scratching our heads wondering well, why didn't you do this all year?
Hmm.
And I think the defense will be solid again. I don't really trust what Vandy has offensively. I think you bounce back. I think the overall tenacity of the football team returns much closer to what we saw against Texas A&M, Kentucky. But I got to be honest, JC, I sit here right now. I've locked in my prediction. I feel good about it, but I am nervous going in this game. This is a scary football game for South Carolina. Thankfully, Vanderbilt's not exactly an intimidating SEC road environment, but you're still on the road in the SEC at night. I think you're a little wounded right now, and the question will be, can Vanderbilt take advantage? Right, they've got this long SEC losing streak. I think they've lost 25 straight SEC games. They've lost 13 straight games to the Gamecocks. And it's like, at some point, right, they're due. I mean, I know they're due, but at some point, those streaks are going to be snapped. Your feelings on this game, your prediction, does Carolina make it 14 in a row, or does Vanderbilt shock Carolina and we're all left picking up the pieces after a tough night in Nashville? Your overall feeling on this game tomorrow night?
I can't rule out a tough loss. I mean, because you think about kind of during the 4-game win streak for Carolina, what was kind of the common denominator was Marshawn Lloyd. And if he's out, it's going to take something to replace him that's not happened this whole year, which is somebody else having a big game running the ball. And so it's scary for that reason, because you can just kind of see a scenario where everything gets bogged down and, you can't make plays. Now, what kind of gives me hope in this, though, is you look at Vandy's pass defense. They're not very good back there. Ole Miss was down to them, and they just started chunking it all. I mean, they blew the doors off of them, right? I don't know how, great Brady Cook was against them in Columbia, Missouri in the second half. They got up 17. Missouri's up 17-0 on Vandy, and 17-14. But, I look at it, a lot of teams have put up yards and points against the Vandy defense, particularly their secondary. So if there's going to be a game rattler and the passing game gets going, this is probably it, and so for that reason, I think Vandy will have some big plays they bust and get some points on the board. I think the Gamecocks, though, will have more. Probably will get a turnover. It'll lead to a short field or whatever. 31-21 Gamecocks. I'm taking the over. I may surprise some people out there because I do think, it'll be one of those games where the Gamecocks will have 31 on the board, but you'll look up, it'll be 330 yards, something like that. Just because I think Carolina's special teams and defense will come back alive and make a difference. And I think this may be the week. I mean, how long has Rattler been stuck on 5 touchdown passes? I mean, it's been since when, So I think he'll get to 6 at least this weekend up in Nashville.
And I'll say this, JC, in closing, that I like your prediction. I agree. And again, I got the Gamecocks winning, but it's one of those that we're like I just speak for myself, I guess. Like I'm picking South Carolina to win because I know we've got the talent. I know we're more talented. I've seen us play well, when all three or when 2 of the 3 phases are working. But it's almost like, too, like, of course I'm not going to pick Vandy. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just not going to do it. You know what I mean? So there's a pit in my stomach that is like, if this offense has to go win the ball game, mano y mano, I'm terrified. Like, I'll just be totally honest. I'm terrified. And like you mentioned, with no Marshawn Lloyd, it can happen, but it'll have to be via things that basically have not happened all year, which could happen, but that's the scary part.
And I'll say this, Clark Lee is not going to sit back in a prevent defense this year and let the Gamecocks chuck it down. I mean, you talk about coaching errors and blunders. I mean, Chris, that game last year, South Carolina, there's about 3 different times that if something had an inch here, an inch there, they would have lost, right? So early in the game, Vandy's walking in for a touchdown. Zach Pickens comes out of nowhere, stuffs the back. They're down up 17-14, about to score a touchdown. Pickens again in the defensive line. They get a big stop, hold them to the field goal. And then thankful for Clark Lee and Zeb Noland and, everybody that was involved with that last drive. That was big because they went down and avoided a terribly embarrassing loss, And this Vandy team this year, there's nothing about Vanderbilt. They're not going to be intimidated by the Gamecocks coming in. because they probably felt like they let it get away last year. And so and last year's Vandy team was atrocious compared to this group. So they're improved. I think Carolina has too, athletically and in the other two phases. So hopefully it doesn't come down to the Gamecocks being down 6 and having to go 75 yards, because that I tell you, the chances of that happening 2 years in a row, slim to none.
Yeah, maybe if it does, we'll see if Zeb can throw the pads and the helmet back on. I don't know. maybe we'll have to call for him. JC Shurburtt inside the Gamecocks of the Big Spur. JC, always a pleasure, my man. I appreciate you taking the time, and looking forward to kickoff tomorrow night.
Hey, great to be with you guys, Chris, and we'll talk to you next week, bud.
Yes, sir. We'll do it again next week. Appreciate it.